Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the TennisONE podcast. We're really excited. In case you are not aware, the show docu-series on Netflix called Breakpoint surrounding tennis professionals dropped on Friday, the first 5 episodes of this series. We're really excited to break that down. We're going to talk ATP side of that today, and of course also get into the Australian Open as we are into the first rounds of that tournament, the first slam of the year. We're ready to go. I'm your co-host Madison Golden, and I will pass it over to you, Patrick.
All right. Hey, Madison. Excited to do another episode here. It's the highlight of the week for sure. So
definitely.
Yeah. And sorry if I sound a little tired because I'm staying up. I'm on Aussie time, as I said in previous podcasts. So yeah, just woke up a couple hours ago, but another really fun night of Australian Open tennis. I mean, obviously the Murray Berrettini match was the match of the night and the match of the tournament so far. For anyone that didn't see that, we have highlights of it in our app, but that was very cool to see. I mean, I like both guys, so I was kind of, I don't know. It was like, especially after watching Breakpoint, right? So you hate to see another one of the Netflix players go down, whether, it's been pulling out early because of injuries or some of them have lost, I think more so on the men's side than the women's, but yeah, it's been fun to watch. And, we did a draft last week with Nate Walroth at Tennis Point, where we picked 5 players each to kind of see who could have the best team throughout the tournament. And let's take a look at it real quick, just to let everybody know, give everybody an update where we're at. Madison, you're leading the women. You're leading the women. How do you feel about that?
I feel pretty good. I'm happy with that. I feel confident in my picks.
You know what?
And
I'm sorry. You're leading the men.
The men.
That's my mistake.
We're all tied in women, right?
Yes. Okay. How do you feel about leading
tied.
the men? That's even better, actually. So,
well, I'm happy that none of the players I picked pulled out due to injury or lost in the first round. So happy with that. Looking pretty good. Obviously, you and I were just talking before the podcast. Nadal looked a little in spots, a little shaky in that one set that he dropped, but other than that, he looked pretty good. Felix taking it in 4 sets, and then Eubanks. We're excited about that. Chris Eubanks, the American wild card into round 2. I'm pumped about that because he was definitely a pick that I felt confident in. And then of course Ruud and Norrie, obviously pretty dominant performances from them. So I'm feeling good right now. I'm excited.
Yeah, Eubanks, I think that's his first main draw win at the Australian Open ever. And he beat Sunwoo Kwon, who just won Adelaide, the second Adelaide event. So that's a great win for him. And to do it in 5, I mean, that's super exciting. I think you had, I guess, Poprin. Poprin is my wild card pick from the draft. And he also won in 5 last night.
Yeah,
that's
morning,
pretty
exciting. Fellow
so that
Aussie.
Was good. Yep. Nate's wild card team, tough draw with Rublev first round. That kind of sucks. But so he's out. But let's see, in our draft, the players that are out that the 3 of us picked: Dominic Thiem on Nate's team, lost to Rublev. Kyrgios was my first pick, and we all know what's happened with him. Major bummer. But other than that, we got all our guesses right for the first round at least. And then on the women's side, it looks like you had Badosa, who also pulled out due to injury, Netflix curse. I had Coco Vandeweghe, who just lost as my wild card pick. And then Nate had Fruvertova, the younger Fruvertova, and she lost. But other than that, it's looking pretty good so far. Again, we'll put the link to this draft board in the podcast article so you guys can look at it. But let's talk what we're here to talk about, and that's Breakpoint. And we're going to talk about the men today. I just want to know what you thought of the show. You watched it. How long did it take you to watch it? Multiple days? Did you do it in one sitting? And what did you think?
Yeah. As much as I talked about not binging it, I watched it in a weekend. I could have watched it all in one day. I was that into it, but I made myself wait for the last 2 episodes. So I watched the first 3 in one sitting, and then I watched the last 2. I know I talked to you about this, but I wish, I want 20 episodes. I don't think 10 is enough. I know they have the footage, just give it to us. It's so good. It's so good.
When are we getting the director's cut? That's what we want to know. Like between now, there's a lot of time between now and the second episode release in June. Like let's see, because it's clear that they filmed with all these players at like every tournament that they went to. But whoever did the best probably in those tournaments, that's kind of how they edited the episodes, right? To show, okay, well, Berrettini made the semis of Australian Open, so we get a full Berrettini episode, right? That would be my
Right.
guess. But
Yeah.
what did you what like? Okay, so you loved it. What did you love about it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big sports docu-series fan, so anytime you're able to see these athletes behind the scenes and really see what they go through not on court and what the typical fan doesn't get a chance to see, I think it's really eye-opening. I have to say, like, the first episode, the introduction to the show Breakpoint, was so good. I had goosebumps, tears in my eyes. It was so exciting, the way that they filmed it, edited it, the sound bites they chose from these players, the commentators, coaches. It was incredible. So if you haven't watched it, highly suggest it. And I feel like it does a really good job of hooking you, right away. Even if you went into it not as a tennis fan and not knowing who any of these players are, I feel like it grasps your attention right away. So
Yeah.
overall, just a really well done series. We got 5 episodes. Like I said, there could have been, I wish there would have been more, but yeah, overall, I'm really excited about it. Patrick, what were your kind of first impressions and what did you think?
Well, it's good to hear that you really liked it because you're in tennis now, but you're not a tennis lifer, right? You haven't been following the sport since you were born, essentially. Which I've been playing since I was 3, so it's a definitely a different perspective. And kind of going into it, I had read some of the reviews from journalists that got screeners of the show. They got to watch it early, and a lot of the reviews were similar in that, like, I think most of them liked it, but everybody kind of said lacks character depth, stuff like that. All lacked surprises. But I don't think it matters that it lacks surprises. Like, you're a journalist that covers tennis every day of the year. Of course, everything that happens. Like, this is for people that didn't watch tennis at all last year. Like, that genuinely don't know the results of the match, and that's who it's made for, right? Like, obviously, that if you know the result of the match, it kind of reduces some of the drama there. But like, that's not really who it's for. Is for me. It's for people that didn't watch last year, and hopefully it'll make them interested to watch this year. So, and even as someone that follows the sport all year round, there were plenty of things that I didn't know happened, and that we'll talk about later as we're going to break this episode. We're going to break point down into some categories to kind of pick our favorite moments and that type of thing. So I'll get into some of that later. But I really enjoyed it. I watched it all in one sitting the first time, and I've watched it a second time since. So, and I even was over at my friends, and we pulled up an episode and watched that there. And I had some friends that weren't tennis people texting me about, like, literally had a tennis friend text me, a guy that hasn't followed the sport his whole life. Like, that's so crazy about Rafa's uncle. Like, just to hear people that don't follow tennis that closely, all of a sudden they're talking about Uncle Tony. Like, that's what you want. So that was exciting to hear. And like, you like the show. What stood out the most to you in terms of, I mean, you got a behind the scenes look at the players.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think in terms of maybe the criticism that it lacked character depth?
Well, I mean, obviously, I understand that because it really, of course, the top, some of the higher players are going to win these big tournaments. Like, of course, it's going to follow the players that are the biggest in the sport. And, although most people, some people might not know, like Ons Jabeur, or not everybody knows those types of players, but I feel like, she's number 2 in the world. She was highly ranked when they filmed this. It's just, yeah, it's just something that, like, they're going to follow these top players. I don't really like, I get that criticism, but like you said, if it coming from the people who cover the sport in depth, I mean, I don't really know. Like you said, what do they expect?
Well, did F1, like, I think what they mean is that okay, you have some of the players like talk about their backstory, like let's say Kyrgios, for example, where a lot of the episode is like, what I've been through, da da da. Well, it doesn't get that much into what he's been through besides just like the negative media that he's gotten over the years, the negative
Sure.
press. But he did actually even tweet like the second half of the episodes are going to be more in depth. So probably getting into Wimbledon for him especially. But I don't know. I like how much can you really cram into an episode? I don't
Right.
know. I thought it was
I thought that they did enough. Like
yeah.
I thought you got good insight on how they are as people, and kind of I think they did a good job of showcasing their personality. Like they tried to show, them doing something besides tennis. Like they I feel like they did a good job of putting a little niche storyline kind of shoved in there. I mean, I understand it was tennis focused, but like I'm just thinking of episode 2 with Matteo Berrettini and Ayla Tomljanovic when they were, talking about watching a movie, and
Yeah.
they got into like a little argument about watching The Holiday with Cameron Diaz. So I just think I like the little things like that. That was one of my favorite parts from the whole series, because I just thought that it gives you something else, and you kind of can relate to them more
Mm-hmm.
because you get to see something besides tennis. And obviously they're elite athletes, and many of us do not relate to that, but when we see other things that they go through, or just something as simple as watching a movie instead of a tennis match at the Australian Open, you can kind of relate to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that they got a little bit of everything in each episode, for each player. And so I was really happy with how it turned out. And again, ultimately, as long as I have friends that aren't tennis people texting me about the show, and that like that's what you want. So I think also Netflix, they did a pretty good job. Like I think that's how they filmed it, is they talked to everybody. Like for example, that in the first episode, they have some parts where they talk to Tiafo, but they don't
Right.
go super in depth to him. I think we know when they will do that, which would be in the U.S. Open episode. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it was good how they did it, because you cannot rely on results. You I know too well from like working at Wilson that you get all this stuff ready thinking like, oh, this player has a chance to win this slam, and then it's all ready to go, and then they lose, and it's like, so it's obviously Nadal won the first 2 slams of the year and he wasn't in it, and Swiatek won the French, and Ash Barty won the Aussie. But yeah, so I think they did a good job. But let's get into the categories here. I think this is going to be the most fun part of the podcast for both of us, and probably the listeners here. We came up with some categories that we want to sort of make our case for what we think is the top thing that happened in the show in these categories. So the first one is GOAT quote. Madison, what was your favorite quote from any of the, again, we're doing the men, any of the men in the first 5 episodes of Breakpoint?
Yeah.
Or it doesn't even have to be from one of the players, by the way. It could be
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. I had a couple that
coaches.
I
Yeah.
that I wrote down. Let me so I guess the one from a player that's currently on tour was from Taylor Fritz. I thought this one was a really good quote that just kind of sums up tennis for those who may not be aware. It's tough to be happy in tennis because every single week everybody loses except for one person.
Yeah.
And yeah, like how can you be happy in a sport where there's a loser, so many losers, every match is single elimination, you one and
Yeah.
done. That's
Yeah.
it.
It's very
So
tough.
it's kind of eye-opening. I mean, and like you said, it's a really tough mental sport, being completely individual. And I thought that was a good quote from Taylor
Yeah.
Fritz.
It's interesting because, like you said, these players are losing more than. I think it was actually Sakari that in one of the episodes, in maybe episode 3, she said that, I lose more than I win, which I thought about. And I was like, well, she has a winning record, probably, right? But to hear her say it like that, it makes you think, wow, even though she does have a winning record and wins a lot more than a lot of players do, she still views it as she loses more often than not, because she's thinking of it in terms of, did I win the tournament? And not just, did I win this match? So that was kind of interesting, and the season's so long. It's from January to November, and competing every single week. Like, that's just such a grind. So yeah, that's a good one.
It's really tough. What did you put for your top quote from the men's side?
Um, I had a couple that really stood out to me, and one that I thought of watching this year's Australian Open. The first one was actually from Paul Annacone, who helps coach Taylor Fritz, and he said, "You always question the all-time greats at your own peril," which is, I
That's a
think, very,
great quote.
yeah. And he didn't really make it up, right? It's just something that a lot of people say, but it's dead on in this case, talking about Nadal specifically. And again, we come into this Australian Open right now where people are, talking about how he's injured, or oh, he's not getting as much velocity on his serve and da da da. But like, again, it's Nadal. It's 3 out of 5, and you saw in this show nobody wants to play him. Really, I mean, somebody at one point said like, you don't want Nadal. I mean, yeah, I thought that was a quote that really stuck in my mind. And the other one that came out was Uncle Tony, one of my favorite quotes of the show, maybe my favorite. So, to tell you the truth, I want my nephew to win. And that was just so good. I mean, it's
He
like,
did not hold back on that. That's for
yeah.
sure.
Well, what did you think of that whole situation and him? He's coaching Felix, but oh, now he's playing Rafa. Sorry, I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously aware of this situation, but I actually put that down as one of the most surprising moments for me was just kind of seeing that full storyline play out and just hearing Felix talk with his team saying like we were fully aware of this coming into it. I
Yeah.
just thought that was like I didn't realize the velocity of that. I didn't realize that they knew and just kind of seeing that unraveled. Yeah, and he's just making these statements to reporters basically like, yeah, I'll cheer for Rafa no matter what. He's family. Like, even though
Yeah.
I'm getting a paycheck from this player. Yeah, that was quite the situation for the French Open this year. It was interesting to see, but I mean, I
Yeah.
guess family's family, but
Yeah. I mean, I don't really fault him. I was shocked at like how easily he volunteered that
yeah,
sentence.
it
It's
was,
like, oh, he's just like, here's some reporters and they just ask him this question. He just gives it to him. He's just like, oh, I want Rafa to win. And
yeah, they didn't fish for that. That's for sure. He laid
yeah.
it out on a silver platter for them.
Yeah.
But
So we could talk a little bit more about it maybe in some of the other categories. But did you have any other quotes that you really liked?
yeah, so this is kind of fitting for the Australian Open because some matches got suspended yesterday due to the heat. So I liked
Mm-hmm.
this one from Andy Roddick. Andy Roddick, playing tennis in Australia in January feels like you're playing in a hair dryer for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah. He's so
I
good, isn't
mean,
he?
he was honestly like he had really good quotes and
Mm,
him on Twitter, he's like one of my favorite people to follow. He just
absolutely.
brings I like that and I like that he pushes back. Like people were kind of speaking against him and some of the things that he said during this show and he just goes at him on Twitter. He just doesn't care.
No, he's happy to get into a little battle with somebody on Twitter, and that's why he's a great follow. He just says it like it is, and yeah, he was one of the most enjoyable parts I think of this show.
For sure.
Little unfair because I like growing up, he was my absolute idol. Just being like a young American kid, like he was the guy everybody wanted to be. Everybody wore his clothes. Like I had all his Reebok stuff, and then when he switched to Lacoste, and then I had his Lacoste hat, and like yeah. So
Have
anytime
you
you
ever
see that,
met him in person?
yeah, once or twice. Yeah, but I mean, not like in super casual settings, more of like photo opportunities, part of gala type things. So nothing where like I'm really having deep conversations with the guy, but he's always been friendly in those situations. And
Yeah,
yeah, I hope we see more of him because he's like, God,
me
if he
too.
could be like a full-time commentator, he would be like the
He's
Tony
so
Romo
good.
of tennis,
Yes,
like
he's
everybody
so
wants him to
good.
do it.
People do.
So
They love him. So
yeah,
bring him
yeah.
on. Bring him on.
Okay, our next category, call it never forget. So the most either memorable or surprising thing that you saw in Breakpoint Part One.
Let me look through my notes here. I'm trying to just because I wrote down, quite a few
Oh yeah.
different scenarios, but
Yeah, we can list the different scenarios and we can even vote on it at the end of this category. And
yeah. Well, I have to say I mean, probably my top two from the men's side. I think Taylor Fritz winning Indian Wells, that was obviously in my top 5 tennis moments of 2022. So that
Mhm.
in an entire episode was really, really cool to see. And he's obviously from California, being a homegrown talent. And I think it was Courtney who covers the WTA. I heard her
Yep.
say in that episode, like, this tournament proves really hard for homegrown talent because it's always slam winners and top 5 players who seem to win Indian Wells because they
Mm.
call it the fifth Grand Slam. And
Yeah.
I just think it was really cool that he kind of pushed through, kind of rewrote the narrative a little bit and gave a California kid like a chance. And he talked about how his dad said when he was younger and coached him that you're going to win this tournament one day. And I mean, hearing him talk about that, like it's just to come full circle like that. It was really cool to see. So that was probably my top moment. And then I also really loved how they told the story of Tanasi Kokonakis and Nick Kyrgios winning the Australian Open doubles in 2022. I loved that storyline and them being friends since they were youth tennis players and just watching their relationship. I think it was so organic and so natural, and they're really fun, and they brought a lot of fun and depth to tennis. And I think Australian fans, obviously, they love Kyrgios, and I think that was a really cool thing for them to accomplish.
Yeah, that photo they showed of Nick and Tanasi when they were kids was so good. Especially Tanasi's haircut was.
He had such long
Oh,
hair.
yeah, for sure. He's come a long way with his haircut, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And
that
just
was
hearing them talk in the car when they were talking about how they used to get 3 to 4 hours of sleep per night because they would
mm,
go out and
yeah.
then I'm like, oh my gosh, just kind of how they've both, grown into the players that they are and matured is cool. But yeah, that was very
Mhm.
exciting.
Yeah, definitely matured because Tanasi was like, you know how we were able to get through it is because we were so excited to go out the next night that it actually didn't matter. We were running on, very little sleep because we were just pumped to go out. So like, and
Pure
then
adrenaline.
he even was like, I miss that a little bit. But you can tell as they get older, as we all do, it's harder and harder to stay out that late. And then obviously, Nick's not single, so he's not going out late. And guess what? He's having
No.
great results and taking it way more
Yeah,
seriously. So
seriously.
I had Taylor Fritz as the most surprising thing as well. Like I actually didn't. All I remembered about that Indian Wells final was that like everybody was talking about how Nadal was hurt. Nadal was kind of had
Right.
the foot injury, and maybe I wasn't paying that close attention or what, but I don't remember any talk about Fritz until afterwards. I didn't remember like going into the match that, oh, he was hurt. And I guess that's because at least how it looks in the show, he had that sharp pain literally the day of, which was,
Yeah.
yeah,
Crazy.
that was crazy. And to see him like, not like his coaches are all telling him you shouldn't play. The doctor's saying you shouldn't play. You're gonna make it worse. You're gonna be out longer. Da da da. And he's just like, no, I'm never gonna forgive myself if I don't play this. Like, and then to win, oh my god, that was so sick.
It was so cool. Yeah, he really did push. I mean, he pushed back against his coaches and the doctors telling him you shouldn't risk it. And he was like, well, if
Mhm.
I yeah, he would have regretted it if he didn't. And
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to not like play Rafa in the finals of Indian Wells, like you have to give it a go. Like I think maybe Paul Annacone, his one of his coaches is telling him to pull out. Well, Paul's coached the best players, Sampras, Federer. These guys, there's going to be more opportunities down the road for them to fight for. And Fritz, there probably will be. I'm sure there will be, but it's not, good on him for saying like, hey, I may never be able to play Nadal in the finals of Indian Wells again. Like I gotta give this a go. I'm not taking it for granted. So
and he played so well.
yeah, that was
Like,
oh, unreal.
yeah, that was a great moment. That was a really good episode.
Yeah, and then I also had just surprising. We kind of talked about it, but I just had Uncle Tony in terms of like just totally volunteering the information before the match and like you
Yeah.
know it's one of those things where I get it, right? It's his nephew. He spent so much time with him, and he's had so much success that if a player does want to work with him, he can just say like, either, no, I don't care about the money. Like, I'm only going to work with you if I think it's worth it. And he also has the power to say, I'm going to do it on my own terms. And then
Yeah.
that's up to the player if that works for them or not. Like, how much do you value Tony Nadal's advice? Do you value it to the point where you can get it for every other player except for Nadal? Is that better than not having it at all? And Felix obviously said it was. He made that choice. And but yeah, I just that was surprising to me. I remember it happening last year, but I don't know. I guess I just kind of forgot that.
Yeah, I didn't remember all the details.
Mhm.
Definitely. Like I don't know if, we necessarily got all of them either. I feel like they did a good job of kind of showing us what really happened at that point.
Mm-hmm. And they were still working together, so it's not like it didn't end. So yeah, I guess he just has to hope he's not going to play Rafa. But if he wants to win the French Open, slim chance that he won't play Rafa.
Right. Yeah, that might be in the cards again. So
mm-hmm. Our next category is must watch. So which player of the guys that were shown in Breakpoint are you most excited to follow in the 2023 season?
yeah, it's just crazy to me that this isn't the player that I'm picking, but just that Nick Kyrgios was ranked number 115 in the world when they filmed this, and now he's number 21, and they didn't even count the points from Wimbledon. So that just is crazy to me. Just like looking at where some of these players, and even on the women too, just seeing kind of how their rankings have changed in, just a few months is crazy. I would say that the player that I'm probably gonna follow, and it kind of was cool to see him in the spotlight a little bit, was Felix. I really enjoy watching him play, and I think that he has a lot of passion and self-discipline, and he is still really young, 21, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, just to have that much composure and poise and respect, and just the way that he carries himself, I'm really excited to see what he can do. I hope that he, gets far in these tournaments and the big slams, and I hope that he has a chance to play some of Rafa again and see what happens, or if he could play Novak and just kind of see where the year takes him. So I'm really looking forward to kind of following him.
Yeah, and he made the quarters last year of the Australian Open, and I guess he made the semis, right, of Roland Garros. So yeah, he's having great results, and you heard Tony Nadal say he thinks that he'll be competing for number one in just a couple of years, and he's been talked about since he was like 17 or 18 as the guy. I remember when I was at Wilson and he was breaking through, he uses a Babolat racket, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, is this guy going to be like the next Rafa? Like, did we miss out on him? And so he's been talked about. You like forget how young he is because it seems like you've been talking about him so long. But yeah, he's definitely got a shot, and he won his first round at the Australian Open. And
yeah,
so we'll see. The one person we're not going to watch at the Australian Open is the one who I picked. Which probably before the show was also the one that I'm most interested to watch, but that's Nick Kyrgios. And I liked his episode. I wouldn't say it was my favorite of the show, actually, even though a lot of people were saying that's the best episode, probably just because he's the most charismatic and kind of he's not as he doesn't hide his emotions, or he lays it all out there. So there's never a time you don't know what he's thinking. But yeah,
that's for sure.
Just like to see him finally take a year serious last year, at least as serious as he can take it. And he's traveling with it with the physio who you saw in the episode. I don't remember him traveling with that guy before last season. And then his manager and his girlfriend, and just like amazing results last year. And it just probably showed him, hey, when I like really focus and put my mind to it, like I can literally be the top or number 2 player in the world probably. So I hope this injury is not that serious and that he'll be back out there soon. It's a huge bummer not to have him in his home slam, but
so tough, especially with the Netflix show, focusing on the Australian Open last year. It's such a bummer. Like, talk about PR bliss. If that could have played out, obviously we wish him the best injury wise, and that's a different circumstance. And I'm sure it was such a hard decision to come to, but
yeah.
I hope, like you said, I hope he recovers fast, because we want to see him. Like, we want to see what he can do this year.
Yeah. So he's my one to watch for sure. And obviously I think he doesn't usually play the clay season. So I think Wimbledon will be the next major we see him at. And he's got a lot to live up to. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles that sort of, nobody really said he was like a favorite going into last year, but this year they will, I'm sure. So that'll be good to see. The next category we have is the movie maker. So which of these episodes do you think would be cool to be made into like a full length movie?
Yeah, I think as cliche as it is, I got to go with the Taylor Fritz and Maria Sakkari episode, just because just seeing the California kid take home the Indian Wells title, full circle moment for him and his family, and just everything. I think that would be, I would be most interested in that one for the men's side for sure. As
Yeah.
far as like a full episode, like obviously Nick Kyrgios super entertaining. That was a really cool storyline, but I just feel like that's like such a story, a perfect sports storyline to see someone like Taylor Fritz take home that title. So, and biggest title of his career thus far. So
Yeah.
that would be something that I would for sure watch.
That's what I picked also, the Taylor Fritz
Yeah.
episode. I mean, there were multiple things that like kind of spoke to me. One of them was, his dad was his coach until he, like really started going after the pro tour. And my dad was also my coach. And I know that's not always easy. You don't want to listen to your parents ever, let alone in sports, let alone in an individual sport that can just be like insanely frustrating. And you travel with your parents almost every weekend by yourself. You're not going to like hotels with your friends because they're on your soccer team or your baseball team and it's fun. Like you're just going with your parents to some hotel out in the suburbs, and you're waking up really early to go out there and play against somebody that might cheat you like crazy because their parents putting a lot of pressure on them to win. So it's not always the most fun, and he kind of acknowledged that, but
He did.
now he also said that it was totally worth it. Like he said that, I know my dad knew I would appreciate it when I got older. And so I really like that. But yeah, obviously hometown tournament, beating one of the guy that has the Grand Slam record after an injury the morning of, that like everyone's telling you not to play. I mean, that's so dramatic, and with Fritz, they don't get into this in the show, but it would be interesting to be in the movie as well, that like he's got a pretty interesting personal life in terms of the last like
Yes.
whatever 5 6 7 years, because he is a father, and was married actually before his current girlfriend. He was married to the woman who he had the child with, and so, and unfortunately it didn't work out. It seems like he's in a good place now, which is great, but that just more things that could add to this kind of lead up to then winning at Indian Wells, which
Yeah.
is the best thing that could have happened to him after winning one of the four majors. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just dealing with all the personal things that a lot of these players go through and just having to kind of compartmentalize, I'm sure is probably one of the toughest parts of, I mean, about any sport, but especially when it's so individual focused. And just hearing all of these players talk throughout the series just about the mentality and just what they're saying to themselves on court, I thought was kind of like, wow,
yeah,
like some of them are saying, you're not going to win this. Like
yeah,
they're literally so negative in their head. I thought that was crazy to just
yeah. It
hear.
was funny. I wrote that down too. Are you talking about Paula Badosa?
Yes.
Yeah, like she was up 5-4 in the set, and granted she was up like 4-1, and then Tomjanovic made it closer, but like that just shows you how mental tennis is, that you can be winning, you can be ranked higher and all this stuff, but like the second things start going the other way or the momentum shifted a little bit, you literally can just tell yourself like, I'm going to lose this now. And it's so hard to like keep a focused positive mindset sometimes. So
Yeah. I mean, you played. How did you kind of deal with that and, kind of change your
oof.
mentality if you're, or is it just so hard to like alter how you're viewing the match that you just can't do
Yeah.
it?
Honestly, I just got older. It wasn't easy when I was younger. I was definitely a kid that threw my rackets once in a while. just didn't want to play all the time. Like I said, I'm from a smaller town, so none of my friends played tennis, and so I kind of just traveled with my parents to tournaments on the weekends, and all my friends played team sports, and it wasn't always the easiest, I think, and so that just kind of translates into the tennis sometimes. If you don't want to be there, it's hard to win against players that are maybe just a little better than you. You kind of end up just beating the players that you should beat, and yeah, it wasn't really until I got older and like played college tennis that, similar to Taylor, I appreciated how many hours how many times he like dragged me out to practice at like 6 a.m. before school or whatever. Like just the absolute last thing you want to do when you're a kid, is wake up that early and go. Anyway, so yeah, as I got older, I was able to deal with that better. And even just like the strategy and everything that goes into tennis, like I say every year, I realize how dumb I was on the court the year before. Like whether it's strategy or things that go on around, like just keeping yourself hydrated or like eating some little snacks in between changeovers to like keep the energy high, or there's just so many little things that go into it. And frankly, you just only get those by playing a lot of matches and getting more experience. And so yeah, I would totally say it's just a maturity thing. And we have to remember that these players, are some of them are teenagers and some of them are in their early 20s.
Right.
And that's, even though, that's maybe one of the reasons it's hard for them to beat the big three. Like experience is huge when the performance level isn't that different, and so yeah, maybe they can last longer physically than some of the older players, but yeah, there's a lot on the mental side and strategy side that maybe they just haven't realized yet. So
yeah, that's a great point. Just maturity and, like you said, what you see in the game, that it's harder. It might be harder for Novak and Rafa to physically. Well, I mean, I feel like Novak's actually he's pretty solid.
Yeah, maybe that's also why they're so dominant, is because you also can't say like, oh, this guy is going to last longer than Djokovic, because he's in such good shape and just spends all day stretching. And
it's literally, as I started to say that sentence, I was like, I can't even say that because it's not true. He can literally go head to head with anybody at any age, and just like the physicality and his fitness is insane.
100%.
So do you think that, there's a reason that they weren't really involved with the show at all? Or is it because they're super private? I know that Netflix wanted to focus on the kind of the up and coming talent who's going to kind of eventually step into those roles that the big three currently have. But do you think there was a reason that they, didn't even comment on anything? I wonder if they even got asked.
Yeah. I mean, the guys that are more established, like let's just say Nadal and Djokovic, what more do they have to gain by being in this show? I mean, it could help, but like they're so established and like have such a huge following and are just so well known already. Like giving access even further into, they're already the ones that do the most interviews and marketing and all this stuff. They probably, if they were asked, they probably just didn't want one more thing. And especially like at the tail end of their career, it's kind of like what I said about Tony Nadal, where like he's accomplished so much at this point, he can just decide exactly what he wants to do and do it his way. And that's probably the case with Nadal and Djokovic and why they weren't in this show. And, the younger players, I think, have more of an appreciation for like what this show means in terms of like the Netflix culture and the social media aspect of it. And so I'm sure they kind of were all excited to be asked. It'll be interesting. Like, obviously they didn't have Swiatek or Alcaraz. I think Alcaraz might be in the second half of the season. Maybe they did get to talk to him. Did it seem like that?
I think I saw a clip. I thought I saw a clip of him in there at one point. So I think like an interview clip. So I think, hopefully, I mean, you would think that he would be a focus point of the second half of the Netflix series. So,
but they did a good job of just picking the players in terms of like, some of them have like famous social media girlfriends and like just lots of different interesting angles to get the conversation going, I think, just beyond like the tennis side of the show. So yeah, and just like picking charismatic players and yeah. So I think they did a great job with what they had. And they can always toss in a interview clip from Nadal where it's needed.
Right.
So they have
Right.
access to that. But yeah, so that goes to our second to last category. Well, really the last category, and one more thing we want to talk about, but the season winner. Which person in this show on the men's side, doesn't have to be a player, but which person did you think won the series, like benefited the most by being in this, and yeah, kind of what it means for them going forward?
Yeah. That's a hard question because these players, I mean, they're all such solid players. Like there's no bad players. They obviously made it that far in those big tournaments for a reason. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I mean, we talked about I really liked all of the Andy Roddick clips and quotes. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really super happy that they incorporated him. I thought it was great that they kind of had a really nice mix of commentators, people who follow the sport, cover it, coaches, and players. I thought they did a really good job of balancing that. I guess the player that I feel like I thought they did a really good job of telling Casper Ruud's story.
Yeah.
I know that he is a player that people have mixed feelings about. Like I know that he's not like the most outgoing personality, and I know that people have mixed feelings about him, but I thought they did a really good job of showcasing just kind of who he is as a person, and just him speaking about losing to Rafa. I think he was
Mm-hmm.
the one that said, I pray to God that I don't play Rafa on clay again, because like he's like, I played as hard as I could, but it was nowhere near to being good enough to
Mm-hmm.
beat Nadal. Like, I mean, so I just thought that the way that he, kind of, it obviously wasn't fun to lose in straight sets in the French Open final, but you did it. And he had another quote that I really liked where he said, um, everyone thinks, oh, sorry, wrong quote. That was from Rafa. Oh, the hunger to win grows even more when you lose in the finals.
Yeah,
And now he's
another good one.
lost 2 finals of a slam. So I feel like this year he could be he's someone to follow closely. And I think that he's capable, and he showed us last season. And I don't even think he expected to do that well last season. So to
Yeah.
just kind of see the year that he had, I think he's someone that people should follow closely, and he has a lot of potential.
Yeah, I mean, you're right in terms of like the charismatic side. He's a really nice guy, and he's just very
Very.
like chill. He's not doing anything too crazy that's going to make like huge headlines, right? He's just kind of an
No.
overall nice, chill guy. But yeah, I think like especially the match footage even of him losing to Rafa, and how many like shanks he had, and just like the whole backstory. He has this Nadal poster on his room, and he says like, I could literally tell you which years he won, who he played, like what the score was. That's got to be so hard to go out and play him, because like you have to be so hungry to win and beat the person, right? And if there's like even a little part in your head that says, well, even if I lose, at least my favorite player gets another one, like you can't have that,
Yeah.
and I don't know that was going through his head or not, but sometimes if you're in the match and you start like telling yourself, oh, well, is it really the worst thing if I lose this match? That's when like you've guaranteed you're going to lose, especially against somebody like Nadal. So yeah, that was an interesting episode for sure,
It
between that and
was.
the Felix.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kind of
like
got a lot.
which was your favorite episode overall?
It's a tough on the men's side. That's kind of tough. I think maybe just because it kind of had the exciting intro to the whole series, episode 1, just
Mm-hmm.
because that was such a good way to start it. And it was kind of like high energy, high octane
Yeah.
doubles partnership. And then you get Kyrgios and the drama, and kind of, they call him the bad boy of tennis
Mm-hmm.
aspect that he brings to the game. So I would say probably episode 1, just in terms of, I feel like it lived up to the expectations, and
Yeah.
it was entertaining through and through. And it definitely left me, I'm like, okay, well now I have to watch episode 2. Like if that's how well they told episode 1, I'm gonna just continue on. And I hope that it's the same way for non-tennis fans and
Yeah.
people who just tuned in and decided to give it a shot. I feel like they did a really good job with episode 1. So I feel like that one was my favorite.
Yeah, they definitely led with the hook, trying to make you let it ride, and don't let that Netflix countdown go away. You just go right into the next episode. But yeah, I mean, in terms of season winner, it's funny. I also had Andy Roddick as one of the winners. I think this just further supports the case that this guy, we need him doing commentary consistently.
All
He's
the
on
time.
Tennis Channel quite a bit, but like it's always from his house. You can tell he kind of just comes on when it's good for him, and that's totally up to him. That's his life, and that's obviously how he wants to do it at this point. But I hope down the road, if we could get Roddick full-time commentary and just
Love
be
it.
around the sport as much as possible, that would be amazing. Because yeah, he's got
Yeah.
great takes, and
He
is awesome to
does.
listen
And
to.
a lot of hot takes too. He's not your stereotypical saying
Yeah.
what everybody thinks. No, he will
Yes.
like push the boundaries and push back and go
Mhm.
toe to toe with some of these commentators. I love it.
Yeah, he's great. He had a tweet, and for the record, I enjoy playing pickleball. So let's just get that out. I like playing. It's fun. It's a fun sport. But he had a great tweet where somebody had said, "What's the main difference between tennis and pickleball?" And Roddick commented and was like, "One is hard and one is not." That was just too good. So that's the kind of thing, like you said, he's not afraid to just call it like he sees it. And yeah, we need more of that.
For sure.
So I had Roddick as one. A second winner I had as Nadal, because even though he's not being interviewed directly for this show,
Mm-mm.
he wins both the majors
That's
that are
true.
featured in this first half. You have Casper praying to God that he's not going to play him on clay, which is Casper's best surface, and he's like, "I pray to God I don't play him on clay." So I think this just further helps Nadal's legacy and just how good he is, that so much of the show talks about how hard it is to beat him. And you have coaches of other players like, "I'll coach you against everybody except Rafa because it's my uncle and our bond is that strong." And like, it's just, so I had Nadal as another winner. And
That's a really good one. That's a really good one because it was focused a lot on him. He was
yeah,
a
he's
hot
just,
topic.
for not being interviewed, he's in multiple episodes, and yeah, he's getting it done on the court, so that's huge. But as far as a player that was actually featured in the series, I picked Fritz, just because all the reasons we've kind of said before, winning his hometown slam despite being injured against one of the guys I just said won the show against Rafa. He's the only one that is shown in this series that beats Rafa in a tennis match. So there was even like a sick, when they started the tiebreaker in that match in the Indian Wells final, there was like a sick shot they showed Fritz where, like, if you pause it, it's almost like he's in the Jordan stance, like in the air with his legs spread, So I was like, damn, Fritz looks really cool in this, especially like telling his coaches, like, "Hey, F off, like I'm playing this. Sorry."
I'm going for it.
Yeah, I'm definitely more interested to watch. After Kyrgios, he's my number 2 in terms of like, who am I most excited to watch this season. And
Yeah.
and he got through in 4 last night, so he's into the second round. But yeah, so we got one more topic here, Madison. I want to know, do you think this will blow up tennis like it did F1? And you watched F1, the F1
I
show.
did. Yeah,
So
I did.
what are your thoughts?
I mean, so I feel like F1 had less of a following than tennis does before that show.
Mhm.
So I don't know if it will be as big or have as much success as the F1 Drive to Survive did. However, I do feel like it's going to bring in some people who maybe only watch the US Open or only watch like one Wimbledon or something, like only
Mhm.
one of the slams. I feel like that could be a good target audience. It's kind of the like people who, if it's on, they'll turn it on, but they
Yeah.
don't necessarily follow it super closely. So I feel like this would be a show for that type of person, or just sports fans in general.
Mhm.
Like my family we always watch the slams, but we never cover tennis in this, or like watch tennis in this capacity. And they
Mhm.
all have watched the show.
Okay.
So I
What did
just
they
feel
think?
like they, so my brother is, he's really just a sports fan, and he's actually only watched one of the episodes, but I
Okay.
told my parents, my grandma's watching it, she loves
Mhm.
it so far. She doesn't know any of these players, like she has
Yeah.
no idea, but
Hmm.
I was like, you got to watch it, it's on Netflix. Like, she has the TennisONE app, she watches our interviews that we do in TennisONE. So
Hmm.
I'm like, some of these players are in the app, like you have to watch the show. And she, so far, she's very impressed, she enjoyed it, she's ready for the next 5 episodes. She does know a decent amount about Wimbledon. I think she had like a
Hmm.
book on it or something that we got
Okay.
her one year. So she is ready for the Wimbledon episodes. But oh, so far so good. My family's a sports family, so I feel like anything, we loved the Michael Jordan documentary,
Oh yeah. So
The
good.
Last Dance, probably one of the best sports docuseries ever, if not
Yeah.
the best. I mean, and that yeah, that was crazy. So they loved that. So I told them, you know, it's not to that level, but it's really, really good. I like it better than the Formula One. And I know I might be a little biased because we cover tennis and we love tennis, but
Hmm.
I like it better. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I just think it's really good. But the golf one's coming out too. So gonna
Yeah.
have to watch that and kind of compare and contrast and just see them being individual sports and kind of similar seasons to see
Yeah.
what they do.
You made a great point about this might be a really good show for people that have already just maybe a slight interest in tennis that don't follow it
Yeah.
all year round, just watch the slams maybe, or if they're in the US Open or whatever. Hopefully having a little bit of background will make them interested in watching it. And especially because it's only like 5 episodes that are really quick that, I mean,
Right.
like I said, I watched it in one sitting. So um, yeah, so that's a really good point. I wonder, the Jordan doc and the F1 show also, you remember the Jordan doc came out during COVID and like
Yes.
everybody, I mean, it's Michael Jordan. So like
That's a
everybody's
good
going to watch it
point.
anyway. But when everybody was like just sitting at home, like looking for anything, especially sports had been like taken away,
That's a
and
great
so
point.
we had like a lack of that already. Everybody was like just so hungry for any kind of sports content. And so I think that really helped it. Drive to Survive, I think 2019 was the first season, right? That the
Yeah,
show came out.
2019. Yep, yep.
Yeah. And so like they've kind of really mostly existed during this COVID phase too, where I think people are watching way more content than maybe they were before, just because so many people work from home, or we were stuck at home for a long time. So I think those both helped it. That maybe,
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about the fact that the Michael Jordan documentary was in COVID, but it
yeah.
was. You're right. That's why it drove. It would have been successful anyways, but that,
Mhm.
yeah, you're right. That totally elevated.
Yeah. And you know what? COVID will benefit this show because more people started playing tennis during COVID. And so we have more casual fans than we did before. So hopefully they all watch this show and tell their friends about it. It's too bad that so many of the players featured are either out with injury or whatever, especially
Such a
Nick.
mm,
Because yeah, the further they would have gone into the tournament, the more this show would have been talked about, referenced, so on and so forth. So it's too bad that we're missing out on that a little bit to start
yeah.
right at launch. But I don't know. Sometimes these Netflix shows pick up like months later. It's not always like right when they come out that it's either watch it now or never see it again. So
And have you seen, you do a lot with our social media here at TennisONE. Have you seen a lot of, traction on social about the show so far? Or what would you say is kind of
I've definitely seen references to the show that
okay?
get a lot of engagement. One of them was somebody tweeted like, "So did Isla end up going to the business center?" Because it doesn't really show in the episode after she and Berrettini have that little chat, and he's like, "No, you can't do an interview in here at 8 a.m. Like I'm trying to sleep." And she's like, "Okay, I'll just go to the business center." Well, then somebody like somehow went back and found the Tennis Channel interview that she did
No
that morning
way.
and took a screenshot of it and said like, she responded to that tweet that was like, did Isla go to the business center? And this person said like, she ended up in the bushes because like her background was like, yeah, hedges or something, probably outside of the hotel, or, just in one of those chill areas.
That's so funny that someone found that and went back and.
So I've seen some like good references to the show. I think most of them the references are from tennis people, because naturally that's mostly who I follow, especially on our TennisONE social media. Our whole feed is pretty much tennis journalists or just people that have smart thoughts on tennis. So yeah, I've definitely seen it being talked about. But yeah, I just hope I've sent it to as many of my non-tennis friends as possible, and hoping to hear positive feedback from them. So
yeah, I'm pushing it on everybody that I know to watch. So
got to keep doing it.
Even if you know a little bit, or like you said, some of them are dating like influencer girlfriends. I'm like, you know who that is? I see you follow her. Why don't you watch like her boyfriend's docuseries? Go ahead.
Exactly. So we'll try anything to keep growing the sport. So, but it's exciting to have a show like this.
It is. Yeah, they did a really good job. So I hope we get more seasons, like we've said. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm curious if I was trying to look up if there was like already a season 2 in the works, but all I could find is just people talking about the second half of this season. So I wonder if they're just waiting to see like what kind of traction it's going to get to decide if they want to film a second season.
In Holger Rune's press conference interview, which is in the TennisONE app, by the way, if you want to go listen, they were talking to him and they said that he was being followed by camera crew. So I wonder, and they did ask him a couple questions about the Netflix docuseries. So I wonder if they're kind of like already just going to do the same kind of format and start with the AO and then move through the year like they did last year.
That would be amazing. I gotta do more research and see if I can confirm it, because that would be amazing if they've got Holger and maybe some new players, young players that have a shot. Hopefully we follow more of like Alcaraz and maybe it'd be cool to get Swiatek on there.
I would love to see Goff. Would love to see her. Yep. Oh, she'd be so good.
Yeah, she's got a hell of a personality. So
she really does. She's so awesome.
Awesome. Well, this was fun, Madison. Thanks for talking with me about the Breakpoint series with the men. We're going to do the women later this week on Friday, so we're going to talk about those episodes, and then obviously more Australian Open in the next 2 weeks. And keep it in the TennisONE app to follow along.